Welcome, guys. We are now live. Great to have you all in here today. And we've got Scotty North here today, and we'll be talking about the 18-year property cycle as well as the HTW clock. So, Scott, from the community members, those within Realm, a few of them have been asking if they can get some insights as to how they can identify how their property might be performing in different areas, and had some questions around the property clock as well. They got some good insights from the HCW clock. Would you be able to give a brief overview on some of the things that we'll discuss today, and whether we're going to start with either clock, because I know there's a few different things that we utilize when you're helping clients come up with property strategies for themselves. Maybe we can start there. How would you like to cover within this session the clocks that we'll be talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Theo. Well, actually, I was coming around here to listen to you talk about clocks, but that's okay. I'll jump in and take over. No worries. Yeah, so that is a question we often get asked is this property cycle thing real or what? And look, I mean, it depends how deep you want to go, right? I mean, the overall answer is yes, of course, cycles are real, whether they're financial cycles, whether they're life cycles, whether it's property cycles, like whatever, right? I mean, things ebb and flow, they come and go, there's different seasons, right? So yeah, the answer is a straight yeah, of course there is. The harder part to answer, of course, is what does that look like and how do I use it to my advantage? Because that's really what people are asking, right? Like, if I want to know this, how do I use it to my advantage? And of course, that was the whole reason I started looking into it many years ago, over 10 years ago now, for the same thing. I came out of GFC and went, a lot of people lost money. Some people treaded water. A lot of people, said they did well and probably didn't. But there was definitely a decent number of people that, whether they foresaw this happening or not, they were either prepared or they foresaw it happening. And I wanted to know that if these things had happened before, what happened then? If they happened before that one, what happened then? So that led me on a bit of a journey to read a lot of different stuff, and that sort of culminated in me finding stuff like Phil Anderson and Gann and all that sort of thing, which, of course, many people have talked about that recently, since that time. But Phil Anderson's definitely a bloke, an Australian bloke who really took it one step further, wrote a book on it, and made a whole thing about it, I guess, and he still talks about it nowadays. And I follow a lot of Phil Anderson stuff. I think it's great. And he definitely is the Australian go-to guy for property cycles, I suppose you'd say. He's an economist, and he's got a lot more hair than I do, so he's obviously doing something right. So let's take a look at the first chart we got here, which is an overall real estate cycle chart. Now, it's pretty bad quality. You can only get something that's really low quality online. It's quite old. But that was a cycle that goes from the 1700s to the 1800s, and it's just a real estate activity, right? So it's just showing the activity of cycles up and down. And I went, okay, that's interesting. So you can see from that things have been going up and down, around, for quite a long time. And so as part of the discovery with that Phil had, and he did a lot of reading before he wrote his book, he ended up kind of putting a date on it, or a time frame on it, I suppose, and it was like something like 18.6 years, sort of varied, somewhere around that. It averaged out at 18.6 years for this real estate cycle. Now, there's a whole bunch of things that line up with that, like in terms of, other weather patterns, other bits and pieces. There's a lot of drivers that go into the overall creation of a cycle, which we're not going to get into today. We're just doing a high-level view. So Phil came up with his own little chart, his clock, which is this original one that he did back in, I think, 2014 or something. We'll throw up on the screen now, which is the 18-odd year property cycle clock. And he dated that, I think, back in maybe 2012. He put dates on that. I can't quite remember. But I don't know if you're watching now and you can zoom in on your screen or not, but there's dates in there that are the little boxes. Now, I'm just going to be really quickly go over this clock. So it's a 24-hour cycle clock. So it's two 12-hour clock faces, one on the inside, one on the outside. So hence there's a 1 o'clock and a 13 o'clock, if you know what I mean. And so that means there's an inner activity, and when you get back round to the 12, then you go to the outer activity. And so those dates were put on there well before those dates occurred, and you can kind of see the dates are in those pinkish boxes on the clock, and that kind of been going like clockwork, so to speak. It's a good pun, that one, CO. And there's a lot of wording on that clock which tells you what happens. So in the inner ring, the inner ring starts at the sort of the cleanup of like a terminal event, a tragic event, or some sort of the end of cycle cleanup, right? So we go there and we see, cleanup happen, rents start to rise, around and around we go, right? And then there's some activity happen. We get into the outer ring, which is where we are now, which is we're on, we've gone full crazy, and the real estate cycle's in full swing, and the outer ring is all heavily emotional, right? So if you think about the inner ring is 7-8 years of kind of rebuilding and sweeping away the carnage and what have you, then the outer ring becomes this highly emotional time, because now it's a really long time since we had GFC, and now everyone's emotional, and you can see in the market the prices are emotional. So if we flick to his next one there, Phil's updated his clock. I don't know if we can zoom that in or not at all, but he's actually just moved the hands on the clock now to 14 o'clock, because 14 o'clock is a valid clock time, of course. But and he's gone there. So we're definitely in the outer stage of the cycle, which is the second half of the cycle, moving to the latter half of the second part of the cycle. And the cycle is made up of kind of two halves, two lots of 7 years with a 1 year mid-cycle in the middle, which was around the time of Corona. And then we had the end of the year is about 3 to 3.5 years of downward carnage at the end. So we're in the second half of the cycle there, which is a second, roughly 7 year time frame. And we're at that point where we're definitely in full swing of activity.
And Scott, what do you mean by the cycle being in full swing?
Yeah, so it's just that emotional thing again, the CO. So when Phil refers to that, it's when you look back at any of your real estate charts, they'll kind of, if you have a tank, the market tanks, then it kind of plateaus for a bit, and then it will start to go up again. But it never goes up in a straight line, right? So it kind of speeds up as it goes up, because then there's that emotion. Because what happens is, if everyone's been burnt, then everyone's sore, they're cagey, they're hesitant to go and invest, they're hesitant to put their money in the market. So after a carnage event, then apart from the people that were cashed up and spent money and bought well, everyone else is walking on eggshells to try and get back in the market. And they're hesitant. And the only thing that stops that is a period of time. Now, you could have it carnage, and you could have it boom 6 months later, and it's not going to boom. It's not going to boom for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it only booms when people want to get into the market and are acting that way, and they're just not going to 6 months after a massive carnage event. And secondly, everyone is slow to respond, including banks with credit and all that sort of stuff. So you're actually not going to see that it's not like stock market where it can kind of bounce or dead cat bounce or whatever they want to call it, right? Real estate, it doesn't do that. It's sort of slower. So what happens is, because it's slower, it gives everyone the impression of security and stability, which, conversely means that it does have that, because you have to transact slower. Things take time. You go, I'm going to buy that $2 million house I drove past on Saturday, and you buy it on Sunday. It just doesn't happen like that. Even the quickest transactions take weeks with solicitors, and even if it's cash, right? Like, things still take time. Whereas you can get in and out multiple trades in multiple seconds online on currency or equities or whatever, right? So property by default is always slower. But because it's something that we reside in and we have an emotional attachment to, it has that as well. Because if your wealth is in stocks and shares and currency and what have you online, like that's a big stress if you miss it, if you lose it. But you might still have your house, right? Whereas if the market's tanking and you can't afford to keep your house or whatever, then all of a sudden it's like, now I don't even have a roof over my own head. So there's always a lot more emotion involved in real estate, whether we think that or not, because we have an emotional attachment to real estate because we live in it. Now that's a pro and a con, right? I'm not using that as a total pro. It's just, it is what it is. So when that happens, then it becomes a slower rise in real estate as it goes up. But as the process of time, we get further and further from a carnage event, then us goldfish humans, right, start to forget what actually went on and go, oh, it's all right. No, property's strong. And to the point now when people go, oh, you can't lose money. I mean, look what's happened since Corona. Like, the things are doubled. If I don't get in now, I'm never going to get in ever in my life. And the thing is, we're still transacting now. We transact in good times. We transact in bad times for our clients, because it's going to depend on the client, their financial position, their goals, what they want to do. And we do the right strategy for the right time in the market. But to simply say that if you don't get in now to property, you're never going to get in, well, that's what we're talking about in that emotional phase, and that's the property market in full swing.
I hear. So knowing that the property cycle is in full swing, and for some of those who wanted to join in earlier, Scott, they're probably wondering, how do they make this apply given where they're at right now? And maybe you can share on that with the other clocks, and maybe we're getting to that soon. I just thought I'd mention some of the guys that have commented so far. Michael mentioned he's at Beachport, South Australia. Michelle's from Padstow, New South Wales. And Greg was cheering about Geraldton and wanted to find out how New South Wales is going in Flinders. We've also had Nash comment from the Gold Coast. So whether someone's in South Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, or Gold Coast, how can they apply how can they go a step further or step deeper into the property cycles to analyze where they might be at the moment given their property?
Oh, mate, you just do what the weathermen do and you grab a dartboard, right? So firstly, Michael, Michelle, Greg and Nash, hello, and thanks for joining us. So if we want to flick over to the HTW clock there, fellas. So this is a tool that we use in our research and discussion with clients. This is a free report that HTW, the valuation firm, put out every month. And they put out, it's either 3 or 4 of these. 2 are residential, which is units, and houses, which will be the next one I'll show you. And then they do some commercial versions of these as well for commercial property. But these are mostly what we're talking about here with residential. And their version of their clock is such that it gives you a view of key suburbs that they've worked in and where they consider it is on the property activity cycle, right? So it's not aligned with a Phil Anderson style cycle, but it is an activity cycle. And one thing to note on their clock, if we have a look at it again, is that if you're on a rising market, you don't have to go all the way around the clock to go to say the bottom of the market or to a declining market, right? It depends on HTW's valuations in that area at that time, and I don't know what their equations or algorithms are at the back end, but they collate that information and then they put this together, which I think is a really, really good tool. If we take a look at the houses one, which is the orange one, same thing, and I don't know how well you can see suburbs on there, but there's some suburbs on there which you go, oh, okay, if you know the suburb, you might think, yeah, that's pretty strong, or that is being a bit weaker, or no, I completely disagree, or whatever, right? So it's just a tool. Everything's a tool, but it's one of those tools to answer the question of how do we put this into practice? How does this work? And this is just one of those things that you get more and more data on to help you make an educated decision rather than doing what the weathermen do with the dartboard. And so that is definitely something. There's a bunch of other data that we can get as well, but this is nice because it's pretty. Yeah.
Do the arms on that clock have any significance?
No. So it's only the outside of the clock that has the suburb or town or region position that has significance based on the inside. So the top is top of the market, bottom is bottom market, and then we've got, declining and rising market. So wherever you sit on there. So I guess let's have a look there. I'm trying to see. Does it say Dubbo at the top? Peak of market. Is that what that says? Yep. So if there's anyone in Dubbo, look, or anyone's been following Dubbo, knows about Dubbo, maybe that's peak of the market, and you might be able to say, yeah, I agree, right? Or, whatever. And the ones to look at really are the left hand, the lower left and upward on this clock, right? So something in the bottom of the market, that's not a bad place to look at buying, and something in that rising market. So around that quarter, that bottom left quarter of the clock. So if we put numbers on, it'd be 6 to 9. So 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock on that clock face are the ones that are of most interest if you're looking for sort of price movement. And the opposite to that, right, probably say 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, is if you really wanted to go and try and screw someone down on price, maybe those areas are the places that you want to go and look at. Do you know what I mean? Like that, and that's sort of, that helps you. And what happened was we had a lot of people say, this is great, this is all good, but, what does this mean? How do we make this work? And I said, okay, well, we make it work like this. So we come up with this, with what we call our compass. And our compass is multicolored, right? Because it looks even prettier than anything else out there. What you kind of do is you take a point like Dubbo, right, which was at the top of the market, and you position it on our compass. So Dubbo is at the top. And so we go, well, that's an oversupply. If we can flick back to the orange clock at the moment, we'll grab a couple more. So what's the suburb down the bottom, Sam?
We've got right down the bottom Geelong, Coffs Harbour. And
okay, so Coffs. And what about at 9 o'clock? What's over at 9?
9 o'clock, we've got Adelaide, Sydney, and Cairns.
Okay, Adelaide. And what do we got down below that at start of recovery? What's the orange one down
Melbourne there? And Sunshine Coast, that start of recovery. Central Coast, start of recovery.
Coast. Okay, all right. So if we flick to our compass here, so that what you do is, so we take the stuff that was at the top and things down the bottom. We had said Coffs was down the bottom, right? So I'm pretty sure we said that Coffs and something else was down the bottom. And so you put that at the 6 o'clock position on our compass. So what you do is, if you were looking for a suburb and you go, yeah, okay, I'm happy to do that suburb. So here's an example for me, right? So you mentioned Cairns was in the recovery point. I'm not a massive fan of Cairns. There's some people who made some good money in Cairns, but Cairns is really cyclical in terms of its ups and downs. A bit like Townsville, you have to know a little bit more about it. So it wouldn't necessarily straight away, just because it was in that strong recovery section on HTW, mean that I'm going to go and say, right, we're going to go and buy in Cairns. It still has to meet other criteria behind the scenes. But let's say there was a suburb that met your criteria. Then you look at our compass and you take it from the HTW position, you put it on our compass. And our compass is going to tell you what to do. So if we have a look at that now, anything on the 1 to 4 o'clock on the HTW clock is what I call discounted buying, right? So you're going to go in, there's carnage happening, there's a falling market, we want to go and screw them down on price. As we level out down the bottom and the property cycle moves around, then we get to sort of the low point in the bottom of the market where you kind of want to be active, right? You're looking to be active when people are inactive. So at the bottom of the market, this market's dead. Well, you can be active. You can be tying up stuff. You can, you know what I mean? You can be optioning things. You can do whatever you want. And also it's a good time for positive cash flow, right? And then we move around, we get that start of recovery and recovery time. Well, if you've tied things up at the bottom of the market, like say splitter blocks or 6 townhouse blocks or whatever it might be in that area, or reno, right? And then you actually do it when it goes over to the 9 o'clock time. That's when you start to realize it. You tie it up down the bottom and then you action it when the whole market moves, because then you haven't had to do anything, right? I mean, the market movement is the one that's generating your profits. And then you want to be out by like 10:30, 11 o'clock on a normal cycle when everyone's going, this is awesome. This, Sunshine Coast or Cairns is the best thing ever. Everyone should be, look, it's in the news. Today Tonight even did a news article about it. We should be there. That's when you want to be out, right? And conversely, on the other side, at say 1:30 or whatever it is on ours, is there's a little tab that says you want to get in, right? So you're considering getting in when everyone's trying to bail, because what are you going to do when everyone's bailing in a suburb or not interested in a suburb? What does that do to your buying power? Well, it means that you can start sniffing around getting deals, right? And so, this is how it works. And before we get off this, just one thing to note is that the other thing that aligns with our compass here is that this is actually generally the investment knowledge and life cycle of an property investor. So if we start from 1 o'clock and move around, what do you do in discounted buying? Well, you're negotiating, right? So the first things you do when you're going to buy your own home is that you don't need to know if it's positive cash flow or anything. You just need to be able to negotiate and get your first home at the best price possible, right? So that's what you do. And as you go around, then you start to I might invest in one property, and then you start considering some positive cash flow, which is round at the bottom, right? And then if you do enough of that and you go, right, I'm going to do something, I might do a splitter block, a reno, or I might do a small development, and that moves around. So it actually reflects the life cycle of an investor as well. And that's part of what we do. So the compass is used to not only indicate market movements, right, with data, it sort of allows us to position someone on it in terms of their skill base or their investment time frame horizon or whatever it might be, right, as well. And that really helps people understand what they want to do next, because there's not much point trying to do a development if you haven't even bought your first property. And by that, I mean that you don't necessarily need your first property, but if you've never even transacted on a lower priced property that, okay, I might have paid too much for it, but I'm going to live in it, so it's okay, right? Well, when you come to a development, you've got to be able to purchase that really right. Otherwise, it's going to screw you over and spit you out. So it helps us understand where someone is in terms of their ability to transact.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Scott. So, guys, for those who are listening in on the replay, feel free to drop your questions in. The compass here helps you to identify what types of strategies might best apply to you, given your current location, whether you're buying at a discount, whether that you're trying to be active and gain something that's cash flow positive, or you're getting involved with development projects. So if you've got any questions for Scott, feel free to drop that into the comments and we'll be able to answer your questions there. For those of you who had questions that were specific regarding your location, I trust the HCW clock will help. Thanks for that, Scott. Is there any other comments you've got for the viewers that are joining us just now?
No, only that we can go into it pretty deep, but this is just a high-level overview. And, of course, it still relates to each person individually, right? So, and that's the trick about the property investing. There's no cookie cutter. You've got to interpret the data, how it relates to you and your investment time frame and your goals and your financial situation. And, of course, people can help with that. But make sure you're in control of your decisions and your money, right? Because someone's always trying to separate you from your cash.
Awesome, guys. So again, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop that into the comments and we'll be sure to get Scotty back on with further insights in regards to your property journey. Look forward to speaking to you guys soon. Bye for now.